In life, there are things we do like and things we don't like. Now, it's easy to get along with the things we do like because they make us happy, they're pleasurable. With the things we don't like, it's slightly more difficult. Sometimes, if we really don't like something, it turns into a phobia, a fear of something. Now, a phobia can develop in a number of ways. Perhaps through a traumatic event or a panic attack that's related to a situation or a past experience. For example, when you were young, you may have watched a film about giant man-eating spiders, and then subconsciously, you may have developed a fear of spiders. Incidentally, that phobia is called arachnophobia. But sometimes there's no rhyme or reason why a phobia develops within someone. It can be put down to genetics or even learned behavior. Now, there are literally thousands of different types of phobias. I'm sure you've heard of the more common ones. Claustrophobia, a fear of confined spaces. Aerophobia, a fear of flying, which incidentally I suffered from for a few years. And then there's acrophobia, a fear of heights. But there are also some obscure phobias that you might not have heard of. There's bibliophobia, which is a fear of books. And then there's one of my favorites, gynophobia, which is a fear of knees. And then there's a phobia that a few of my close friends suffer from when we're down our local pub. And that's called Myroundaphobia. And that's a fear of going to the bar. However, there's one phobia that I think all of us suffer from. At least I know I do. And that phobia is called Taphophobia, the fear of being buried alive. During the Victorian era here in London, the fear of being buried alive peaked, partly due to the amount of cholera outbreaks that were ravaging the city of London. So in 1896, two men, a Mr. William Tebb and Walter Haldane, co-founded the London Association for the Prevention of Premature Burial.
Victims of cholera often fell into a coma and were buried soon after death to prevent germs from spreading. Methods of determining one's death were far from reliable. Even with modern medicine, doctors have been known to make mistakes. A shocking number of people supposedly underwent this horrific fate in the 1800s. But without modern medical devices and heart monitors, how could anyone really tell when a loved one had passed on? While medical science wouldn't find solutions to these problems right away, the very technical field of coffin production perhaps could. It was during this time clever feats of engineering sought to comfort the panicked population, and one such invention was the safety coffin. The safety coffin provided its occupants with the ability to escape from their newly found entrapment and alert others above ground that they were indeed still alive. Many safety coffins included comfortable cotton padding, feeding tubes, intricate systems of cords attached to bells, and escape hatches. Unfortunately, most neglected methods for providing air. One of the most popular kinds of safety coffins was called an escape vault. Each grave door was built as a hatch that could be opened from the inside for those who didn't have the patience to wait for someone to come and rescue them. But the most popular designs kept to the bell and flag mechanisms. These were constructed in the 18th century. They were cheaper to produce and seemed to be more efficient, but they still came with critical design flaws.
William Tebb and Walter Haldane published a book suggesting to the public ways of avoiding premature burial. Within the book, they documented over 200 cases of people being buried alive. But all of these cases could not be supported by any evidence at all. Parliament looked upon the publication as more alarmist than alarming. The association sought to bring about real change and influence public thinking. However, taphophobia, although running rife amongst the Victorian community, seemed to exist largely in the mind rather than in reality.
The London Association for the Prevention of Premature Burial did, however, manage to instill an element of fear amongst the Victorian community. So much so that a thing called waiting mortuaries were established. This was a place in which bodies were kept until they showed signs of putrefaction. They gained popularity in Europe by the late 1800s. They were essentially hospitals for the dead. There were wards of corpses, watched over constantly by nurses. In order to mask the smell of rotting human flesh and organs, flower arrangements were placed beside each bed. At some of the hospitals, attendants held feathers and mirrors in front of the corpses' mouths to check if they were still breathing.
The fear of being buried alive has been reimagined in many publications and even films. There's an incredible scene in the film Kill Bill, directed by Quentin Tarantino and starring Uma Thurman playing the character of Beatrix. She wakes up to find herself interred in a coffin. What happens over the next 5 minutes is one of the greatest scenes in cinema, accompanied by some incredible music. Needless to say, she finds a route out, but I'm not going to tell you how. Watch the movie.
While the Victorians in London were doing their best to avoid being buried alive, let's fast forward to the 20th century to a young man called Mick Meaney, an Irish barman living and working in Kilburn, northwest London. The Tipperary-born builder found worldwide fame in the 60s for being buried alive, by choice. Meaney was always searching for fame and decided that he could break the world record for the most number of days buried underground, which was held by an American who went by the name of Digger Dell. However, he had to get his body into physical shape for the task. He carried out his workouts in the Admiral Lord Nelson pub in Kilburn and fed himself a diet mostly consisting of steak and cigarettes. On the 21st of February 1968, he had his last supper, and with great fanfare and the whole world watching, he was lowered into the ground on a piece of land located at the back of a builder's yard. Meaney bedded down for the challenge. He'd wake up in the morning at 7 a.m, perform some exercises, read the paper and eat breakfast, which was passed through a tube. Going to the toilet involved a hatch in the base of the coffin. Meaney finally emerged from the coffin on April the 22nd, 1968, to be greeted by a host of waiting celebrities eager to have their photo taken with this new subterranean superstar. Mick Meaney had smashed Digger Dell's 45-day record and emerged blinking into the sunlight after a whopping 61 days of burial. And like a true Irishman, he headed straight to the bar to reward himself with a pint. And a well-deserved one at that.
Despite the fear of being buried alive, it's worth noting that there are no documented cases of a safety coffin ever saving somebody's life. And another thing, modern-day embalming has mostly eliminated the fear of being buried alive, partly because no one has ever survived that process. So it really does seem taphophobia is a fear that exists largely in everybody's mind, rather than in reality itself. And because of modern-day science and medicine, the chances of anyone being buried alive now are practically... Let me just do that again. Just the last bit. The chances of anyone being Where is that coming from? One more time. The chances of anyone being buried alive are practically Oh my God. It's coming from over there. Thanks for watching Secret London with me, Mark Munro. Leave any comments down below. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit the thumbs up button. And if you really enjoyed it, why not subscribe? Until next time, stay tuned.